The black boy looks at the white boy. I walked and I walked till I wore out my shoes. I can't walk so far, but yonder come the blues. Ma Rainey. I first met Norman Mailer about 5 years ago in Paris, at the home of Jean Malaquais. Let me bring in at once the theme that will repeat itself over and over throughout this love letter. I was then, and I have not changed much, a very tight, tense, lean, abnormally ambitious, abnormally intelligent, and hungry black cat. It is important that I admit that, at the time I met Norman, I was extremely worried about my career. And a writer who is worried about his career is also fighting for his life. I was approaching the end of a love affair, and I was not taking it very well. Norman and I are alike in this, that we both tend to suspect others of putting us down, and we strike before we're struck. Only, our styles are very different. I'm a black boy from the Harlem streets, and Norman is a middle-class Jew. I'm not dragging my personal history into this gratuitously, and I hope I do not need to say that no sneer is implied in the above description of Norman. But these are the facts, and in my own relationship to Norman, they are crucial facts. Also, I have no right to talk about Norman without risking a distinctly chilling self-exposure. I take him very seriously, and he is very dear to me. And I think I know something about his journey from my black boy's point of view, because my own journey is not really so very different, and also because I've spent most of my life, after all, watching white people and outwitting them so that I might survive. I think that I know something about the American masculinity, which most men of my generation do not know because they have not been menaced by it in the way that I have been. It is still true, alas, that to be an American Negro male is also to be a kind of walking phallic symbol, which means that one pays, in one's own personality, for the sexual insecurity of others. The relationship, therefore, of a black boy to a white boy is a very complex thing. There is a difference, though, between Norman and myself in that I think he still imagines that he has something to save, whereas I have never had anything to lose. Or perhaps I ought to put it another way. The things that most white people imagine that they can salvage from the storm of life is really, in sum, their innocence. It was this commodity precisely which I had to get rid of at once, literally on pain of death. I was afraid that most of the white people I have ever known impressed me as being in the grip of a weird nostalgia, dreaming of a vanished state of security and order, against which dream, unfailingly and unconsciously, they tested and very often lost their lives. It is a terrible thing to say, but I'm afraid that for a very long time, the troubles of white people failed to impress me as being real trouble. They put me in mind of children crying because the breast has been taken away. Time and love have modified my tough boy lack of charity, but the attitude sketched above was my first attitude, and I am sure that there is a great deal of it left. To proceed, 2 lean cats, one white and one black, met in French living room. I had heard of him, he had heard of me, and here we were, suddenly, circling around each other. We liked each other at once, but each was frightened that the other one would pull rank. He could have pulled rank on me because he was more famous and had more money, and also because he was white. But I could have pulled rank on him precisely because I was black and knew more about the periphery he so helplessly maligns in the white Negro than he could have ever hoped to know. Already, you see, we're trapped in our rules and our attitudes. The toughest kid on the block was meeting the toughest kid on the block. I think that both of us were pretty weary of this grueling and thankless rule. I know that I am. But the rules that we construct are constructed because we feel that they will help us to survive, and also, of course, because they fulfill something in our personalities. And one does not, therefore, cease playing a role simply because one has begun to understand it. All rules are dangerous. The world tends to trap and immobilize you in the role you play, and it is not always easy. In fact, it is always extremely hard. to maintain a kind of watchful, mocking distance between oneself as one appears to be and oneself as one actually is. I think that Norman was working on the Deer Park at that time, or had just finished it, and Malaquais, who had translated The Naked and the Dead into French, did not like the Deer Park. I had not then read the book. If I had, I would have been astonished that Norman could have expected Malaquais to like it. What Norman was trying to do in the Deer Park, and quite apart now from whether or not he succeeded, could only, it seems to me, baffle and annoy a French intellectual who seemed to me essentially rationalistic. Norman has many qualities and faults, but I've never heard anyone accuse him of possessing this particular one. But Malaquais' opinions seemed to mean a great deal to him. This astonished me too, and there was a running, good-natured but astringent argument between them, with Malaquais playing the role of the old lion and Norman playing the role of the powerful but clumsy cub. And I must say, I think that each of them got a great deal of pleasure out of the other's performance. The night we met, we stayed up very late, and did a great deal of drinking and shouting. But beneath all the shouting and the posing and the mutual showing off, something very wonderful was happening. I was aware of a new and warm presence in my life, for I had met someone I wanted to know, who wanted to know me. Norman and his wife, Adele, along with a Negro jazz musician friend, and myself, met fairly often during the few weeks that found us all in the same city. I think that Norman had come in from Spain, and he was shortly to return to the States. And it was not long after Norman's departure that I left Paris for Corsica. My memory of that time is both blurred and sharp, and oddly enough is principally of Norman, confident, boastful, exuberant, and loving, striding through the soft Paris nights like a gladiator. And I think, alas, that I envied him, his success, and his youth, and his love. And this meant that though Norman really wanted to know me, and though I really wanted to know him, I hung back, held fire, danced, and lied. I was not going to come crawling out of my ruined house, all bloody. No, baby, sing no sad songs for me. And the great gap between Norman's state and my own had a terrible effect on our relationship, for it inevitably connected, not to say collided, with that myth of the sexuality of Negroes which Norman, like so many others, refuses to give up. The sexual battleground, if I may call it that, is really the same for everyone, and I, at this point, was just about to be carried off the battleground on my shield, if anyone could find it. So how could I play, in any way whatever, the noble savage? At the same time, my temperament and my experience in this country had led me to expect very little from most American whites, especially, horribly enough, my friends. So it did not seem worthwhile to challenge, in any real way, Norman's views of life on the periphery, or to put him down for them. I was weary, to tell the truth. I had tried, in the States, to convey something of what it felt like to be a Negro, and no one had been able to listen. They wanted their romance. And, anyway, the really ghastly thing about trying to convey to a white man the reality of the Negro experience has nothing whatever to do with the fact of color, but has to do with this man's relationship to his own life. He will face in your life only what he is willing to face in his. Well, this means that one finds oneself tampering with the insides of a stranger to no purpose, which one probably has no right to do, and I chickened out. And matters were not helped at all by the fact that Negro jazz musicians, among whom we sometimes found ourselves, who really liked Norman, did not, for an instant, consider him as being even remotely hip. And Norman did not know this, and I cannot tell him. He never broke through to them, at least not as far as I know. And they were far too hip, if that is the word I want, even to consider breaking through to him. They thought he was a real Swede of cats, but a little frantic. But we were far more cheerful than anything I've said might indicate, and none of the above seemed to matter very much at the time. Other things mattered, like walking and talking and drinking and eating, and the way Adele laughed, and the way Norman argued. He argued like a young man. He argued to win. And while I found him charming, he may have found me exasperating, for I kept moving back before that short, prodding forefinger. I couldn't submit my arguments or my real questions, for I had too much to hide. Or so it seemed to me then. I submit, though I may be wrong, that I was then at the beginning of a terrifying adventure not too unlike the conundrum which seems to menace Norman now. I had done a few things and earned a few pence, but the things I had written were behind me, could not be written again, could not be repeated. I was also realizing that all that the world could give me as an artist it had, in effect, already given. In the years that stretched before me, all that I could look forward to in that way were a few more prizes, or a lot more, and a little more, or a lot more money. And my private life had failed, had failed, had failed. One of the reasons I had fought so hard, after all, was to wrest from the world fame and money and love. And here I was, at 32, finding my notoriety hard to bear, since its principal effect was to make me more lonely. Money, it turned out, was exactly like sex. You thought of nothing else if you didn't have it, and thought of other things if you did. And love, as far as I could see, was over. Love seemed to be over not merely because an affair was ending it. It would have seemed to be over under any circumstances, for it was the dream of love which was ending. I was beginning to realize, most unwillingly, all the things love could not do. It could not make me over, for example. It could not undo the journey which had made of me such a strange man and brought me to such a strange place. But at that time it seemed only too clear that love had gone out of the world, and not, as I had thought once, because I was poor and ugly and obscure, but precisely because I was no longer any of these things. What point, then, was there in working if the best I could hope for was the Nobel Prize? And how, indeed, would I be able to keep on working if I could never be released from the prison of my egocentricity? By what act could I escape this horror? For horror it was, let us make no mistake about that. And beneath all this, which simplified nothing, was that sense, that suspicion which is the glory and torment of every writer, that what was happening to me might be turned to good account, that I was trembling on the edge of great revelations, was being prepared for a very long journey, and might now begin, having survived my apprenticeship. But had I survived it? A great work. I might really become a great writer, but in order to do this I would have to sit down at the typewriter again, alone. I would have to accept my despair, and I could not do it. It really does not help to be a strong-willed person, or, anyway, I think it is a great error to misunderstand the nature of the will. In the most important areas of anybody's life, the will usually operates as a traitor. My own will was busily pointing out to me the most fantastically unreal alternatives to my pain, all of which I tried, all of which luckily failed. When, late in the evening or early in the morning, Norman and Adele returned to their hotel on the Quai Voltaire, I wandered through Paris, the underside of Paris, drinking, screwing, fighting. It's a wonder I wasn't killed. And then it was morning. I would somehow be home, usually anyway, and the typewriter would be there, staring at me, and the manuscript of the new novel, which it seemed I would never be able to achieve, and from which clearly I was never going to be released, was scattered all over the floor. That's the way it is. I think it is the most dangerous point in the life of any artist, his longest, most hideous turning, and especially for a man, an American man, whose principle is action and whose jewel is optimism, who must now accept what certainly then seems to be a grey passivity and an endless despair. It is the point at which many artists lose their minds, or commit suicide, or throw themselves into good works, or try to enter politics. For all of this is happening not only in the wilderness of the soul, but in the real world which accomplishes its seductions not by offering you opportunities, to be wicked, but by offering opportunities to be good, to be active and effective, to be admired and central and apparently loved.